Welcome everyone to the last day of the Toronto session of the Fellini Italy Cinema International Conference on the Centenary of Federico Fellini's birth. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that this land on which the University of Toronto operates for thousands of years has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. The past three sessions have provided a wide variety of excellent and thought-provoking presentations, and today we will continue with a wonderful keynote from the amazing filmmaker Guy Maddin, who will be discussing his film The Rabbit Hunters. We will then have a panel reevaluating Fellini's films with Giovanna, who's here, Kevin Bongiorni, Marco Malvestio, who's also here if you want to wave, and Heather Faye McIntyre. Finally, we're going to have the panel Q&A for the asynchronous presentation that I did with Christina Stewart on the Michelangelo collection, which is housed at the University of Toronto. I want to give a final thank you to all of the conference organizers, Luca, Marco, and especially Alberto. I also want us to all give a collective big Zoom round of applause to Alessio, who has been an amazing Zoom master for the conference. It has been a real pleasure for me to work with all of you this past year on the conference, and well, we've created lots of memories. I also want to thank our sponsors, the Goggio Chair in Italian Studies, the Cinema Studies Institute, the Istituto Italiano di Cultura in Toronto, and the Department of Italian Studies. Also a final reminder, the Rome Conference will take place January 20th and 21st, 2021. Okay, well now I have the great honor and pleasure to introduce Guy Maddin, who has directed 12 feature-length movies, including The Forbidden Room, My Winnipeg, and The Saddest Music in the World, which is one of my favorites, and immeasurable shorts, one of which we'll be talking about today, The Rabbit Hunters. Twice Maddin has won the National Society of Film Critics Award for Best Experimental Film with Archangel and The Heart of the World. He has also been bestowed many other awards, some of which are the Telluride Silver Medal, the San Francisco International Film Festival's Persistence of Vision Award, and an Emmy for his ballet film Dracula: Pages from a Virgin Diary. Maddin is also the author of 3 books, and his writing has appeared in several journals, including The Believer, CinemaScope and Sound, and Film Comment. He was a visiting lecturer in film at Harvard University and is currently the screenwriter in residence here at the Cinema Studies Institute at U of T. Finally, he is also a member of the Order of Canada and the Order of Manitoba. And I wanted to leave you with this wonderful John Waters quote about Guy Maddin. He said, "Maddin is the most reluctantly radical and humorously tortured maverick working in the movies today." I will now hand it over to Guy.
Oh, thanks so much, Jessica. And gosh, what a nice eulogy. I hope if only I could be alive for my funeral and make sure that was read. For me, thanks for thinking to have me. Whoever thought of it, Alberto Zambenedetti was the person who contacted me, but I've been made to feel very welcome, especially by my old friend from a different life a long time ago, Frank Burke. It's great to see you, Frank, again. It's my first time seeing him in 40 years almost. Anyway, it seems like a wonderful group of people. You're an intimidating group of people for me, because I'm probably the least qualified person among you to speak about Fellini. But I was approached to make, I was commissioned by the Brooklyn Art Museum Pacific Film Archives, BAMPFA, to make some sort of Fellini centennial tribute. I was approached just a couple of weeks shy of his birthday in January So it seemed a bit late and hurried and modestly budgeted. All of those are the kind of obstacles I thrive on. So those are not complaints. But you know, gives you plenty of excuses, and it makes you feel better operating without a safety net. If you can shout out all your excuses while you're plummeting to your death. Anyway, I got this commission and felt immediately underqualified because though I had been life-alteringly ardent about a number of Fellini films, I was by no means even close to a completist, and had seen a number of even of his canonical films only once or twice over the previous few decades. So the first thing I did was accept the commission, because it's always good to do something and be challenged. And it's a great excuse to do some research. So I dived back into some old favorites, Cabiria and La Strada, you know, the real right down the middle canonical greats, and then discovered a few that I should have been familiar with decades earlier, like Director's Notebook and Toby Dammit. I couldn't believe I hadn't seen those before. So see what I mean? I know you're probably closing your hearts to me right now, but what a joy it was to just dilate my own heart to these wondrous things. And then it got me thinking, you know, I still didn't know what to do by way of a centennial tribute. And this was organized by a film programmer who used to work for TIFF named Susan Oxtoby. She's an old friend of mine. And I just kept asking her, you know, I can't do a Fellini impersonation. I'm not Fellini. I'm Icelandic Scottish, you know, and, you know, it's not there in my temperament. But and she just said, well, please just filter Fellini somehow, the spirit of him, through the medium of you. She knows I pretend to dabble in psychic phenomenon, at least cinematically I do. So she just said, filter, you know, Fellini through you and see what happens. And then the more Fellini I watched, and especially at the age of 64, I remembered why he spoke so directly to me right from the start, over 4 decades earlier. First of all, I could feel it in him, his being from Rimini, which has been described to me as, maybe Frank can confirm or deny this, but Rimini's been described as the Winnipeg of Italy. I'm from Winnipeg, Canada, and I guess it's a smaller city, but just in Ividolone, Fellini just nailed that state of life that 20 and 30 something ne'er-do-well men sometimes occupy. I certainly did. When I met Frank, I was just wandering around, just trying to scrounge up enough money to get a suit from a secondhand clothing store that I could abuse with my carousing and my laziness. Abuse my suit by lying on the couch for far too long every day. And there was just something in the spirit of that film that I could not believe. I couldn't believe someone had made a film about me, even though it was in Italian. And it just, it spoke to me instantly. And then the more I watched of Fellini, the more I realized he was in touch with his dreams in ways that were as important to him that as dreams that were important to me. I didn't even consider picking up a camera and making movies until I realized I could tap into my dreams for an almost infinite source of script matter. And then when I finally got a hold of his dream journal, it was confirmed for me that his anxieties are very similar to mine. you probably all know the journal, the really beautiful illustrated coffee table book. I know Alberto showed me his copy proudly, and it's something I only have in PDF form, but I'll get myself a hard copy soon. But I've always kept a dream journal, and I've used the dreams to really help me out when I don't know what to put next in one of my self-indulgent film projects. And just to discover that so many of Fellini's dreams made their way directly onto the screen as well, and into unrealized work, was really exciting for me. So I asked the commissioning programmer at BAMFA, Susan, what if I could take dreams directly from Fellini's dream journal, the ones illustrated by Fellini himself, and kind of use that as a starting point for the project. Just shoot some of the dreams. There's the problem that I'd be shooting them using actors in Winnipeg who have very Winnipeg accents. And once again, I wasn't trying to imitate a Fellini movie. That's deadly, or do a parody of one. I was allowed to slather my own DNA all over it. Just accept the fact that I couldn't make a Fellini film. But I thought by adapting his dreams, Susan got quite nervous because of the short amount of time I had to prepare the film. She felt that clearing the copyright on the dead maestro's dreams would take too long and might result in overages in the budget, which was very discouraging, because I thought a way of, I just thought dreams would be, since they were my way into my dreamy existence as a Winnipegger, Ividoloni, and as a dreamer slash filmmaker, that would be the most honest and comfortable way into the project. But then it occurred to me that I had kept, I could access my own dream journals and tried to find dreams that were consistent with Fellini's anxieties, and that they'd not only be copyright free, but they would represent my work. And I had partners on this too. I work in a collaborative team with the brothers Johnson, Galen and Evan, and they also are prolific dreamers and keep accounts of it. And so we just started talking about our dreams, and whenever they intersect, and watching all the Fellini we could. And we just found some that worked with us. And then at one point, Evan had suggested that we get Isabella Rossellini, who's a friend of mine, to play a Fellini figure, a Fellini stand-in of some sort. Fellini's name is never used in the movie, but and that really took it to a new level, because I know Isabella herself also is a prolific dreamer and uses her dreams in her own work as a short filmmaker now. She's really churned out a lot of really charming comedic short films about entomology and the sex lives of various animals and things like that. And called Green Porno is her sex lives of insects, and there's other things. You should check them out online. That they're really beautiful. I started to talk with Isabella about it, and she got excited about it. I hadn't worked with her in a while. No one likes to come to Winnipeg to work. And this was in January. So it's the coldest city in the Western Hemisphere. I think only Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia is colder in the world in winter. And so no one will come to Winnipeg in the winter, and I don't blame them. So I used some of the money in the budget to fly to San Francisco, where she happened to be working on a film. But before doing that, I tapped into some of her dreams and personal accounts of Fellini. She knew Fellini a bit through her father, Roberto, and she knew Giulietta Messina as well. And she just spoke of the unfathomable amount of marital suffering or the kind of injuries of infidelity that Giulietta must have endured, but marveled also at the durability of that union and the amount of love they had. And of course, Giulietta shows up so often in Fellini's dream journal, his anxieties over her health and over missing flights, and of course, some other common themes that you're all familiar with. It turns out I've never been married to anyone long enough to have persistent anxieties about spouses showing up in dreams year after year. My marital anxieties have been different and confined mostly to waking hours. But there were so many other things that were just, I was able to copy and paste without any worries of litigation. Anyway, Toby Dammit became an instant intoxication for me because it was, I guess it was always going to be a film I loved, the way I'm wired, and it was just such a pleasant surprise, and I was kind of ashamed that I hadn't encountered it until less than a year ago, and there was just something so startling about it, something about, well, Terence Stamp, and it's just, it was one of the most oniric film experiences I've ever had, and the fact that it's an adaptation from an Edgar Allan Poe story was another strangeness to me, and it struck me as unlikely. I guess I'd been reading about it, but I'd never seen it. I think maybe I feared I'd be disappointed in it, but quite the opposite. Anyway, its palette excited me. Different things excited me than maybe would have when I was a younger filmmaker. Its palette and its artifice and the dreamlike cuts. It seems to speak to the viewer in the perfect dream vocabulary, and from start to finish. And I loved the playfulness of Fellini, the dream playfulness, the fact that there are many cardboard cutout actors interlarded with real living performers on Toby Dammit's trek through the airport. And I noticed for the first time this beautiful combination of deeks and moves that Fellini uses while moving his camera through the sets in that film, often where he's not just dollying, but also tilting, panning, and zooming all at the same time. And it just created a really nice organic, because it was a mid-60s dolly track, and a zoom, which is never entirely smooth, thank God. They're pretty smooth, but they're definitely real and organic and human. They're not digital, these zooms. And so there was just something so dreamily unsteady and woozy and delightful in the palette and the motion and the whole logic of it. And I knew this was sort of the starting point for a film. And so immediately tapped into one of my airport anxiety dreams and just went from there. I also I'm a person who likes to have tears jerked out of him when watching a movie. It's not absolutely necessary, and but the Italians of Fellini's vintage, his contemporaries, Roberto Rossellini and of course De Sica, have just yanked gallons of salt water from my face over the years. And I guess Fellini did it first to me with Cabiria, and then La Strada, and then and now it's getting so, and maybe this is the same for you, it's enough for me to be watching something that's just great, that's just so well done, that I'll weep. And then, I don't know, I just thought that if I could tap into the spirit of Fellini's dreams, and be as honest as possible with myself and with my feelings about Fellini, and as honest as possible about Isabella Rossellini's feelings about the couple. And so she ends up playing not just Fellini, but a kind of a combination of a Fellini figure and she's obviously a woman in a very binary sense. She's a woman, and Fellini was a man, and but Giulietta seems to be present in. I was hoping to make her somewhat present in this gender hybrid protagonist of someone who is who says at the beginning, "Last night I dreamt I was alive again." And it seems to me if Fellini could have one last dream, it would be that he was alive again. And in much the same way that I now have dreams that I'm young again, or that I have implausibly lucky things happen to me. It seemed like in revisiting Fellini, it sure would be nice if I could convey a posthumous dream by him, or him and her simultaneously. So I guess that was the approach I went into. But in Winnipeg, in the middle of winter, on a short schedule, trying to conjure up such idealized feelings certainly has its challenges. And I have learned over the years not to get too excited about the words on the page, because realizing your idealized visions of a project meet with considerable challenges right away. It's really hard to find actors that can do exactly what you hear and see in your imagination. And so you have to be willing to adapt and adjust on the fly. But luckily, I just had Susan Oxtoby's pom-pom waving cheers from the sidelines, ringing her words ringing in my ear the whole time. You don't have to do Fellini, just channel him through you and just acknowledge what he's meant to you in a way. So I guess that's how I set out on the project. And I don't know, it didn't really differ from any other film project in that way. You have a plan, a little sketched out blueprint, an approximation on paper. And it's so encouraging to see Fellini's own storyboards, which are so charmingly rudimentary, even though he's an excellent illustrator, and know that they were similar to mine. They were kind of approximations. You get the feeling that he really planned his earlier films out a lot in a certain way and his later films in a different way, and that at some point he just allowed things to happen. He'd work at it and be very capable of thinking on the fly. That's the impression I get. Maybe you can all disagree from firsthand knowledge or from your studies. But the feeling I got as a filmmaker as well, I almost feel like when talking about Fellini, I have to describe myself as an aspiring filmmaker, even though I'm 64 years old and only have a few years to go till I'm the age Fellini was when he passed away. I still feel like I'm learning, but you get a feeling from watching another filmmaker's work about how they approach their matter on set, their material. And it felt like I was at about, if I just pulled my socks up a little bit and tried a little harder, I could maybe be as playful and as freewheeling as he was during his director's notebook phase. So anyway, you could tell I was trying to be someone that I'm not quite, but that I was at least spiritually aligned with. I think at times I was pointing in the same direction as him, but I didn't feel like a medium possessed by Fellini or anything like that. but I did feel well positioned to at least do something and see what would happen. I don't know what else to say about it right now. Um, other than that, after looking at all the Fellini films again, and after spending almost my entire life in Winnipeg, many abortive attempts to escape later, I'm in Toronto right now, but I'll be going back to Winnipeg in December. I do feel some comfort knowing I know Fellini did escape Rimini and went back only rarely. But I feel probably the biggest connection, not through our respective dream lives, but through our hometowns, strangely. And that's it for now. Maybe I almost have to implore one of you to ask me a question or something like that to draw me out a bit more.
That's amazing. Yeah, Frank, do you want to? I think Frank has a comment. So go.
Great.
I think I'm obligated after this is so moving to me. So
pardon me, Frank.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, I'm to see you again after all this time. I have had so many responses when I watched the film. I mean, it's a total soul meld between you and Fellini. At least that was my experience in watching it. And I hadn't been aware that it was a film specifically made in relationship to the centennial. And I kept seeing things, and I kept saying, well, I've got to remember, this is Guy's film. This is not a Fellini film, but The Sick Wife, Toby Dammit, even The Journey of G. Mastorna. I don't know if you're aware of that, but that's coming back from the dead. Or being in an afterlife, as it were. The Red Scarf, I assume that was, I mean, there were just so many Fellini things in it that I thought either where you really are a medium and this is very spooky, or you were making it with the knowledge that you were. And Toby Dammit, of course, Toby Dammit is one of my favorite films, so I was just so pleased to see the airport scenes and be reminded of Toby Dammit. But I was struck by so many things, even in hearing you talk today. Oh, one thing I want to mention to everybody is that Russ Kilborn has written, and Guy has seen it, this wonderful article on my Winnipeg, W.G. Sebald and Eva Deloney, talking about the similarities. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's in the companion to Federico Fellini. So if you have a chance, but there are just two other things I'll say briefly because I'm really, really, really moved by this experience. One is I found it a tremendous act of humility on your part to give yourself over with your strong vision, your extraordinary filmmaking, and to be able to give yourself over to a project where, to a certain extent, you're working through somebody else's visionary life and experience as well. And the other thing I would say just for now is that that you said you couldn't make a Fellini film. Well, Fellini couldn't make a Maddin film either, and that's great for both of you.
Yeah, thank God no one can make each other's movies, but that's, yeah, but one can sure be, it's always surprising to find out that, say Jean Vigo basically was trying to make Charlie Chaplin movies and things like that and failing, but somehow just creating something so strong anyway. And I'm sure all filmmakers at one time or another are heavily influenced by their gods and goddesses. But thank God you have your own, you have your own voice, for better or worse, and other things come out. You just hope it'll be interesting. But it is only now that I realize how terrifying the project could have been, because there's just so many ways to let down your commissioning officer or to the film, as as the film neared completion and its premiere date, which was supposed to be at the at a big San Francisco fundraiser held in a bank, and Susan told me that she was a little worried because the film was to be she just told me this with 3 days to go or something like that. The film was to be projected on the big marble walls of a bank, and that the acoustics seemed to be pretty terrible in there, and that it would just be projected while people were milling around and eating their canapes and drinking and saying hi to each other. So she wondered if I could add subtitles to it at the last second, and we did. We added some subtitles, but I thought that's not an ideal premiere, like in a big memorial edifice with really bad sound issues. But then this was on March 10th, and I think most of the patrons invited to this gala were wealthy, older people, and so the whole event was canceled because of the COVID, the mounting fears over COVID. And so its premiere was moved to the next day, an afternoon screening at the BAM PFA, and it played just before Director's Notebook, but that was announced as the final screening at that facility before it too would be closing. And so there was just a handful of people there, real, I guess, the real hardened regulars, and some Fellini-esque background people seemed to show up as well. And it was a very strange, almost non-premiere of the film. And so it hasn't really played anywhere except for you guys. So thanks for watching it. What else to say about it? I was sort of scared, I was a little worried that this little visit this morning would be described as a keynote, because I knew I didn't have a keynote lecture in me, but all I had was my experiences. I'm slowly trying to build a little reliable rep company of extras in Winnipeg. Winnipeg has, Frank may remember this, just such strange assortment of faces walking its streets. But when you do a casting call, none of those faces show up. The people that show up are, people that for whatever reason want to be actors and want to be movie stars someday, but they're living in Winnipeg, so it's not likely to happen. And so you get, they're often attractive people, but they just don't have faces that pop the way Fellini faces pop. And finding Fellini-esque faces in Winnipeg isn't so easy. There is a large Italian population, but that's getting literal-minded. But Winnipeg's probably more, before it started to get diverse in the last 10, 15 years, because Immigration Canada sends all new Canadians, especially the ones from really warm climates, to Winnipeg just to test them to see if they want to stay in this country. So there's a lot of new Somalian Canadians and Sudanese Canadians and things. But the real foundation of Winnipeg is the Slavic face. And so I've had to go out for some of my film projects, just go out onto the sidewalk and it's not like me to do this. I'm not that assertive, to just go out and ask people if they'd like to be in a movie. And it wasn't exactly what I pictured when I first picked up a camera in my late 20s. I thought I'd go up to pretty girls and ask them if they wanted to be in a movie and convince them I'd be legitimate and that they didn't have to worry about my intentions or anything, but that I would be surrounding myself with all sorts of glamorous types. But here I found myself swallowing my Adam's apple nervously to go up to senior citizen men or women, and asking them if they would mind taking their teeth out and seeing, if they'd be interested in being in a film. And they'd often be very wary. They certainly hadn't heard of me, the local filmmaker. And, but I am slowly collecting my own Winnipeg version, which is quite different. um, a sort of a cast of faces, a gallery of faces that I can pick through to fill in. And some of them I'm slowly starting to give speaking roles to. And I guess some of them were these older men that were the rabbit hunters in the movie, people that actually have good voices as well as striking faces and beards and things. And I guess I'm just going to, late in my career, Fellini started it so early, but I'm just gathering some reliable, colorful faces, people that have some sort of presence on screen. I shouldn't even be discussing this in the same session as we're talking about Fellini, because man, no one did it better or more pronouncedly than he did. And you know, everyone knows what Fellini-esque means, especially when talking, you know, they start thinking of a real varied array of body types and faces and characters, and they started popping up pretty strongly early on. But it's something I should have done years ago, because when I don't even have the nerve to watch my old movies, but all I have to do is remember them and how bland the effects of my extras were. But there's so much to learn from Fellini, so much to learn.
Well, guys, as a self-described non-Fellini expert, I think you've given us quite a lot to think about. And I'm especially sort of interested in this idea of, you know, directors from peripheral places. And I wanted to ask Frank, because you mentioned earlier on in your talk about the connections between Rimini and Winnipeg and that sort of bonding between you. And I was wondering if Frank had an opinion on that.
I think it's filtered somewhat through Russ Kilborn's discussion. Well, it's filtered through seeing My Winnipeg, which is, of course, absolutely an extraordinary film. And it's been, I guess, 30 years since I lived in Winnipeg. And it's funny to hear the people create an analogy between Rimini, which is a seaside, and tourist city to a large extent, in Winnipeg, which is at the heart of the universe. So I think it's the feel of a relationship to a hometown. And I mean, what My Winnipeg is about, the sort of this voice that is going to get out of town, is going to get out of town, is going to get out of town, sort of going back to sleep and dreaming, and almost like Snapperaz at the end of City of Women. And doesn't get out of town, but it's that pull of the hometown, I think, rather than the specifics of the two cities. Because my experience, I was like a Somali, and I don't at all want to be facile about immigration, but I was sort of like a Somali, because I went from Florida to Winnipeg, so I was sent from the heat to the cold, and that was amusing for about 2 years. About 2 or 3 years, when winter was coming, I was thinking, this is really amusing. I'm really looking forward to this. And then it became really coming to terms with how cold it was. So a lot of my memories of Winnipeg have to do with the wonderful people I met, the strong sense of community that's there, and the cold. And I think Fellini's view of Rimini was he got out very quickly, because he did not have the same kind of attachment. And clearly, I think the fact that the guy stayed, and obviously Guy would have to answer this, but the fact that he stayed in Winnipeg means that it has a really strong and positive hold on him in a way that Rimini didn't have for Fellini, except that Fellini kept reinventing in Amarcord and so forth. In Ostia, he would reinvent in Ostia his Rimini, and the hold that it had on him would be recreated, but it wouldn't be by going back or by staying in the town that he grew up in. I don't think that answers your question, but that's just what sort of pops in my head.
No, thanks. It didn't even occur to me that Rimini is, of course, a coastal town, and the idea of it being tourist. Yeah, no one has ever gone to Winnipeg as a tourist, and the few people that have expressed interest in the town based on seeing my movie, I've just warned them, you've seen the movie, now you don't have to go. But I don't know. But I think you're right. It's the flip side. But sometimes the flip side is, as Fellini got out, I didn't. I've had my grave backhoed open. It's just a matter of rolling me into it. But, when you think in math terms, like the absolute value of something, a negative 7 things is the same as a positive 7 things. It's still 7 things. And Fellini's relationship to Rimini is the same as mine to Winnipeg in its size, probably. I just happen to still be there. And well, who knows where, I don't know where Fellini's buried, but it would be a mean trick on him to bury him in Rimini, I guess. Anyway,
he is his. I think his grave was backhoed as well in Rimini, and there's a monument that everybody got angry about because it's meant to look a bit like the ship, and the ship sails on, and some people thought it was gross, and other people. So there's a fight. Anything about Fellini and Rimini is a fight, but yes, he's buried in Rimini.
That's hilarious. Of course, well, you never really leave your home because in some form or another, it keeps pushing through in your dreams. And so he may have successfully left. He may have stayed on that train and got out at the end of Ividoloni. But obviously it keeps popping up in his work. So yeah, I think it doesn't even matter whether I'm going back to Winnipeg or not, or how much time I've spent there. It's even my childhood home, which I haven't been in for decades, still appears so often in my dreams that I'm beginning to get, pathologically concerned about it. But that's why I like authors and filmmakers where I can sense this. This is also an issue with them, even if it's not so explicit in their work. So like the French filmmaker Jean Vigo, I feel a strong connection with his childhood. And he made one of the great childhood movies of all time, Zero for Conduct. But there's still a connection to, it's still felt that as a filmmaker, he could get down on all fours and communicate with children somehow. So, and it's the same with Fellini. The children I had to cast all, had Winnipeg accents. And so I felt it was more important to steal dialogue snippets from dubbed 60s European movies and softcore porn films even, and just place them onto the lips of the children in my movies, just to give that oniric, disembodied feel that Fellini always gave me. Alberto, did you have your hand up at one point, or were you?
Well, I was very much enjoying what you were saying now about, the techniques that you use in your film. So I didn't want to derail the conversation too much, but in your catalog and in your history, you seem to have an expanded sort of like relationship with Italian cinema. You've worked with Rossellini a number of times. You wrote the foreword to Angela Dallevacche's book on Italian divas, which is, a cornerstone of the discipline in terms of like, silent Italian film. So I'm wondering if, I could sort of, get you to talk about your relationship with Italian cinema at large, as opposed to just Fellini, and where Fellini fits perhaps in that interest, or perhaps I'm reading too much into it.
No, I the Italian diva pictures were very important for me. The performers in it, the stars, the women that these movies were built up around, are incredible performers. And literally every emotion running around in their sizzling, love traumatized brains is visible, rippling across their faces, their clutched bosoms, their anguished torsos, their flailing limbs. And I just love the fact that you can read their interior so beautifully and it's just so expressionistically outwardly. And I felt that working with non-actors actors that were nowhere near as gifted or genius or even talented at all as I had to in my earliest decades as a filmmaker in Manitoba. I don't think I was driven enough to seek better actors. I just liked putting my friends in, and I was comfortable, but I knew they were extremely limited and in some cases even too shy to act. But I felt that if I could just get them to mime out the basics of my film of my film efforts and primitively put them together and just sort of rely on everything coming across as with some sort of dreamlike honesty, working on the principle that no matter how crazy and jumbled a dream may be, that it's really only got the elements of honesty all jumbled up and stored in a strange way in the brain. It's only got honest units to work with, and that there's something true coming out in these dreams. That's based on the assumption that dreams don't come from some sort of outside source, that there aren't, that there aren't paranormal forces imposing messages into your dreams, but that the dream is just a jumbled version of all the truths that you've stored away in your head. And by truths, I mean, in an emotion is a truth. If you're anxious about something, it's just a fact that you're anxious about something. If you're heartbroken about being mistreated by a lover, that's just a fact. Whether you're thinking irrationally or not, even your irrationality is a fact. So there's all these truths in there, and they can come out. I'm in danger of losing my train of thought, by the way. But at least it'll be an honest loss of train of thought. Anyway, the divas just struck me as just such an uninhibited, like a dream. There's Eric. No, what's his? I'm sorry. I'm blanking on the British film critic who writes, theater critic who writes on melodrama and tragedy. But he gave me a great working definition years ago for melodrama. And he, by way of an example that, and you all know this, I'm sure, but that in our dream lives, we're allowed to possess someone we lust after. If we're mad at someone, we're allowed to hit them. If we see something we want, we're allowed to just take it. You don't always, sometimes, dreams are often very frustrating, but you're allowed to weep openly in dreams without making a horrible social incident of yourself. But in real life, of course, we have to conceal all of these impulses under the guise of decorum. And so that melodrama, though, can cram a huge story into 90 minutes simply by uninhibiting all those emotions in people and just making outwardly apparent to anyone watching what's going on inside people's heads. And that the dreamer and that the child and the neurotic are all granted this outward manifestation of what are normally concealed feelings. So that a common take on melodrama from just, say, undergrads I teach now is that melodrama is just life exaggerated. It's just everything's exaggerated. But if you exaggerate the truth, you're distorting it and changing it into something that isn't true. But if you're uninhibiting the truth, you're keeping it true and you're just making it more, you're just revealing it. And so there's a huge difference. And I think good melodrama is uninhibiting, is revealing the truth. And so once I realized that's what that was, I could watch the Italian diva pictures without any guilt at all. I've always enjoyed them just because they're so crazy. But now I realized I was in the presence of, masters of their craft, these actresses and the filmmakers themselves. And so that excited me because I knew that I would never have control of my actors, but I could So I never have the genius of any of these Italian divas in front of my cameras, but I could at least get them to just uninhibit themselves in their own way, the way John Waters does with Divine, say, another favorite actress of mine. And it's just, yeah, you could add drag queens to that benighted and charmed, privileged crew of actors, the melodramatic diva, the child, the dreamer, and the drag queen. They get to be uninhibited and honest. And it's really exciting to me because you could set up pretty seminal story situations, and even if you weren't a great master at directing actors. The fairy tale elements in De Sica always meant a lot to me too, because I was always more comfortable with the way silent movies are constructed. Silent films are one big stride toward the fairy tale. They just can't have the utterly naturalistic so-called realism that talking pictures can have, or not as easily. There's plenty of exceptions to things I'm saying, but I had always been under the impression that neorealist films were, because of the presence of the syllables realist in there, were realistic. And of course, at first glance, they're shot on real locations mostly, or very realistic looking sets. But the stories are the Zavattini ones for De Sica are often structured like fairy tales or melodramas, and they're tear-jerking, and they have horrible coincidences in them like melodramas. And so you end up with Shoe Shine and Bicycle Thieves and Umberto D and movies that whenever I give a plot synopsis to someone who hasn't seen them, I break down crying. And of course, Rome Open City, and then Knights of Cabiria and La Strada are similar. And I was always thrilled to find really well-crafted scripts in these neorealistic-ish films where you expected something to have more of the natural flow of real life, but there's just so much hard work and craftsmanship that went into the scripts, and they're just so effective in ways that weren't that different from the best Hollywood tearjerkers once you got past the superficial differences of language and shooting locations, except they were often way better, so and then I don't know. I don't know if I have many more huge Italian influences other than some authors, but I love Italo Calvino and a few. I love the Decameron. I guess I like Pasolini a lot too, but I haven't seen Pasolini in years. I'm just on the verge of launching into a binge to see what I think. The last time I saw a Pasolini movie, Frank was shivering in Winnipeg.
That's amazing. Well, does anyone have any other questions for Guy? Oh, Frank, go ahead.
I just want to say, it's a stroke of genius on the part of the organizers to have Adam, obviously, but also to have Guy and to give a really strong and very meaningful Canadian dimension to the conference. So I just want to thank them. Thank you guys. It's just been extraordinary for me, because I'm a New Yorker who moved to Canada, who loves Italian cinema, and so this sort of mescalanza mi piace tanto. And the other thing I just wanted to say is, if people haven't had a chance to see Rabbit Hunters yet, please, please, please see it. It would be a wonderful way, once the conference ends this morning, for everybody to finish with Guy Maddin's The Rabbit Hunters. It's just such an extraordinary film in relationship to both Guy's work and Fellini's work. And Guy, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank. It's just such a warm group to immerse myself in on a Saturday morning. Thanks for your kind words about The Rabbit Hunters. It's just 9 minutes long, So you can, you still have time to go out for a snack in the middle of it, but it's short. It'll be over quickly if you do watch it. And it was something. And I learned a lot while making it. So it felt great. So this whole experience has been positive, and it's fantastic to finally get a chance to talk about it with somebody, let alone an intimidating gallery of faces. You've all been very generous and kind this morning, so thank you so much. Yes,
Diana.
Yeah, I just would like to thank you because you brought in buckets of tears and anxieties and enthusiasm and definitely something that is Fellini's world is overflowing with, and so it's great that you brought this to the conference today, and I'm looking forward to see the film. I didn't have time this week, but and the other thing I just wanted to add shortly is that when you were talking of Winnipeg and Rimini, I thought how Fellini, not referring to Rimini, but referring to the Eur neighborhood in Rome that he loved. He said that he loved the neighborhood, but he couldn't possibly live in it because you cannot live in your dream. So I was wondering if there is a relationship between you and Winnipeg, that you could not live in his dream, but you're sort of living in that dream and making something other with it. I just wanted to add it because as you were talking, I thought about it, but thank you so much. I really.
That's a really interesting thing for him to say, and it's redounding with me. It never occurred to me that I should have just moved away from Winnipeg. And since I wouldn't be able to escape it in my dream life anyway, I could have had it both ways. But the fact is I get to travel a lot, except during this pandemic, to film festivals. So I get to live in Winnipeg and travel a lot anyway. But I could have just moved away and just gone back to Winnipeg at night in my dreams. That would have been a better situation. But rent is more expensive in other cities. So I don't know. Thank you. And I guess that's it. Are we wrapping up?
Unless anyone else has any questions for Guy or comments. And Alessio just reminded everyone that the link is to the asynchronous presentation is at the bottom of the program. So if you like to watch it, even maybe I guess you might have some time during the break. So we do have a break scheduled from 10:30 to 10:45. But I'm happy if there's a couple more questions, or if you need to go off to the bathroom, feel free to do that, and we will be reconvening at 10:45.
Okay. Well, thanks again, and congratulations to all of you.
Alberto, did you have something to say?
Well, I don't want to, abuse of guys and everybody else's time here, but I do have just a quick curiosity to ask you, because you talked about the kind of like the mist premiere of the film, which was to be in kind of like you described it as marmorium, I think, building with terrible acoustics, and so it happened that 6 or 7 months later we are all in this strange virtual building with terrible acoustics anyways. And I'm wondering how that feels for you to circulate the film in this format as opposed to having it perhaps how you designed it to actually be seen on a big screen next to a Fellini.
It's not so bad, because once you're watching the film, people will, they'll be watching in the comfort of their own homes, and it should have nice, you should be able to hear the film in your own home. If you have headphones or even just out of the speakers, the sound design isn't so overly fussy that it requires headphones or anything. You should be able to just watch it on your laptop. It's just a few minutes long. And then the people that sit down to watch it actually are curious about it. So it's not being forced on patrons at a gala, so I think it's better, and it's just fine. It's just fine with me. Maybe earlier in my career where I really needed feedback, and only positive feedback, I didn't want to hear any negative feedback, I would have been more stressed out or crushed that it didn't get its official premiere. I feel for Fellini himself in a way that his centennial year has been such a fraught year, and that you know, so thank God you've carried on with this conference, because it just felt like these celebrations that could have happened at all sorts of film festivals all over the place. Just, you know, it was so disappointing that they couldn't fully bloom. But all in good time, I guess. And Fellini's far greater than any 100 years could contain him anyway. So I think it'll all be great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Alberto. Thank you, everybody. I hope to see you again someday.
Yes. Thank you so much, Guy. This was just fabulous. I'm going to give you a Zoom round of applause. Thank you so much for giving us your time this morning. And it was just a really fabulous to hear the story and how it sort of came about. So I think that everyone enjoyed it. It gave us a lot of food for thought too.
Great. Well, I really appreciate it. And it was great seeing you again, Frank. And have a great day.
Great. Okay, so we will take a break and reconvene at 10:45 for the next panel.